Tonight on Politicat, a terrorist attack in California. What is the government doing to prevent future shootings?
And month of measles, we examine possible causes of the outbreak.
Plus, is your period tracker tracking you? We look at 2 alarming reports.
Those stories and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Joey Safchik.
And I'm Justin Sweet with lots of news to cover this week, so let's get right into it. We begin tonight with breaking news from North Carolina. At least 5 people have been shot and 2 are dead on the campus of the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. 2 are facing life-threatening injuries. The alleged shooter is in custody and is a student, identified as 22-year-old Tristan A. Terrell, according to local station WSOC-TV. Police were sweeping university buildings as of an hour ago.
Tensions are rising in Venezuela tonight after opposition leader Juan Guaidó called for the military to overthrow the government. Guaidó is backed by the U.S., but the current socialist government is denouncing the calls as a coup. The Venezuelan government appears to have shut off CNN and BBC as clashes continue.
We've been speculating about it on our show for weeks, and now former Vice President Joe Biden has officially announced his 2020 candidacy. In the first 24 hours of his campaign, Biden raised $6.3 million, surpassing the first-day aggregates of his Democratic opponents. Before announcing, the 76-year-old faced recent scrutiny for reportedly touching women in manners that made them uncomfortable. No prominent Democrat has suggested he step back.
And it's a bit messy in Michigan after a panel of federal judges ruled last week that 34 legislative districts in the Great Lakes state are extreme partisan gerrymanders and unconstitutional. The ruling orders lawmakers to redraw maps before the 2020 elections. But it's critical to note that the Supreme Court is currently deciding 2 other gerrymandering cases, one in North Carolina and the other in Maryland. Those rulings in those cases could reinforce this news out of Michigan or overrule it.
On Saturday, another killing in a place of worship. A man opened fire in a Chabad center in Poway, California, killing 1 and injuring 3 others. The shooting took place on the last day of Passover, and the suspect is in custody. This shooting follows the Easter bombings in Sri Lanka and last month's mosque shootings in Christchurch, New Zealand. Last Wednesday, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she plans to work on an agreement between technology companies and governments in order to eliminate violent extremist content on the internet and social media. Politicat's Megan Leibowitz spoke to a Chabad rabbi who was classmates with a Poway rabbi who was shot.
You cannot let these people create the future narrative, not of the Jewish people, not of the community at large, and we need to stay strong in a way that we're able to conquer our fears, to stand up with courage, and to move forward.
In some of these acts of terrorism, technology and the internet has played a role. To unpack this, I'd like to welcome in our panels Politicat Special Correspondent Caitlin Boudreau and Politicat Director Ben Trachtenberg. Ben, what do you think the role of technology is in promoting extremism?
Well, I think it's played a huge role, especially over the past decade or so. I think that we've seen an ever-increasing amount of people who have become radicalized terrorists on the internet. Hate groups are operating without any bounds, and they're connecting people all over the world. So definitely an increase in the power and reach of a lot of these extremist groups that we haven't seen before.
I think what we're really seeing here is kind of all of this echo chamber stuff. It's all of the fake news. It's everything bad about social media. It's really coming to a pinnacle that results in people, you know, going into places of worship and deciding to take other people's lives. This is really just one example of just a litany of problems that are plaguing social media. We've seen this happen in other shootings, and it's really time for the social media companies to do something about it.
Now, Rabbi Klein said armed guards would help protect synagogues. Let's hear what he had to say.
To be at the front door of every synagogue at the time of worship. So I think that's the direction that we're going to need to go as a society, as sad as it is.
So having armed guards at synagogues is not new, But what do you make of that? Is that the solution to this problem? Is putting more armed guards going to stop this plague?
I think to some extent, unfortunately, yes. And you see this in schools. I mean, there are schools with metal detectors. You have school resource officers protecting students there. I think adding armed guards to synagogues, to mosques, to other potential threats, I think it just makes the most practical sense. As sad as it is, I feel like that is the immediate response to keep people safe, but I think we also need to be working on a more long-term solution as well.
I agree. I think it's, overall, it's this very sad thing that in this day and age, we have to have armed guards at the gates of places of worship, but I know that my synagogue personally in New York has always had, as long as I can remember, someone standing out front, and it's just unfortunately something we need these days to keep people safe. I really hope that that in addition to several other different strategies to foster more understanding and to cut back on hate groups can eventually lead us to a place where we don't need to have guns to protect houses of worship. But at the moment, people's lives are the most important thing, for sure.
Social media has also played a role in spreading propaganda and misinformation, which can be used to promote violence, intolerance, or confusion. Whose responsibility is it to promote social media literacy, Caitlin?
I think it starts in schools when kids are very young. Even in elementary school, you teach kids to read. Kids are interacting with the internet from the minute that they're aware of anything, because the internet is everywhere, right? If you have an Amazon Alexa in your house, that kid is interacting with it. They need to understand. I mean, it's hard to teach a small child the implications of using social media. However, you need to they need to know from an early age that you can't trust everything that you come across on the internet, and you have to just start there.
Ben, does this fall on the backs of the education system, or does it fall on the backs of the actual social media companies?
Well, in a way, it's both. I agree with Caitlin. I think that children need to have some way to contextualize what they're seeing on the internet. They are being exposed to things, ideas, at an incredibly early age, and often completely alone with no supervision of anyone to tell them this is a lie, this is not. That is of the utmost importance. It should be as up there with reading and writing, is understanding in a world where information flows at an incredible rate, how to sift through that and understand what's right or what's not. I also agree that social media companies have become a safe haven in a way for a lot of propaganda, a lot of hate groups, and not necessarily saying it needs to be censorship, but there needs to be a way that they can take responsibility for the content that is posted there.
Well, going off of that, to what extent is censorship appropriate, especially after an act of terror, but perhaps prior restraint? Where does that come into play?
Yeah, I mean that's again another very difficult question, and intrinsically I'm against censorship. I'm against censorship on the internet. However, and one of those reasons is that I don't think it necessarily works that well. The internet is still quite an open space. It feeds into the narrative that a lot of these sort of fringe groups have, which is that they are being oppressed, that they are sort of being censored, that they are telling the truth and being shut down, and that there's some vast conspiracy. And it reinforces a lot of those beliefs, and they move to even less understood and patrolled parts of the web. So it causes a little bit of an issue there. So I don't have the answer, but I think there needs to be, we need to fight back with information, with the truth, and actually confront these ideas rather than just always shut them down, because it's not going to change anyone's mind.
Are there governmental regulations that need to come into play?
I think Europe, the EU, and in particular the UK is doing a good job trying to get out ahead of these social media companies, and I think Facebook, Twitter, I don't think they're necessarily responding very well to it. I think it's interesting, right? Because the idea that the American government the idea that the government should not be involved in issues like censorship and speech is a very American concept, and I think that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but
All right, that's all right, Caitlin. We'll continue to monitor the intersection of technology, government, and extremism as New Zealand Prime Minister Ardern and French President Macron discuss the issue in a meeting on May 15th. We'll be right back.
At Northwestern, we're wildcats in every way.
Northwestern break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for the sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Welcome back to Politicat. Now let's send it over to Justin with this week's Money Minute.
Thanks, Joey. Over the past few weeks, Silicon Valley has been quite busy, as many tech companies who are almost certainly on your smartphone went public. That doesn't exactly mean they're thriving. Take the ride-sharing service Lyft. Its stock market debut price was just over $87, with a valuation near $24 billion, though it is now tanked over 30%, currently trading at $59. On top of that, it recently became the most expensive U.S.-listed stock to short, with almost $500 million being bet against the company. Now, it's not exactly uncommon for very successful tech companies to falter when they first hit the NYSE. Facebook dipped over 50% when it first went public, before increasing in value more than 800%. But in the case of Lyft, their doom might be the cause of rival Uber, which is set to hit the stock market next month. Uber is seeking a valuation up to $90 billion, more than 3 times Lyft. When Uber first filed to go public, Lyft stock tumbled. Ride-sharing companies are not just new to the market, but they're especially difficult to analyze. Last year, Lyft lost over $900 million, with Uber losing more than $1 billion in the first quarter alone of this year. Nevertheless, both are generally seen as long-term investments as they try to carve out a niche in the stock market.
Thanks, Justin. The United States is currently in the middle of its worst measles outbreak since 2000, when the disease was officially declared eradicated. There are currently more than 700 cases of measles in the U.S., and that number shows no signs of slowing down. More than 200 students at Cal State Los Angeles and 27 at UCLA are quarantined tonight after possibly being exposed to the disease. The majority of those infected have not received the measles vaccine. Now, there are genuine reasons to refuse a vaccine, such as allergies or a compromised immune system. However, increasing numbers of parents are refusing to vaccinate their kids because of scientifically unfounded fears over the, quote, dangers of vaccines. Measles was one of the vaccines featured in a widely denounced study that falsely linked the measles vaccine to autism in children. To analyze this, I'd like to welcome back our panel. Now, why is this issue exploding so dramatically right now?
Well, I think it goes back to sort of our discussion earlier. The internet has definitely allowed for a lot of parents who have these false beliefs, or scientifically false beliefs, to connect, to encourage others not to vaccinate their children. And I think that it's really allowed this idea to spread, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, new parents are a vulnerable group of people. I think they want the best for their children, and when someone comes along and says, this thing that you think is good is bad, they're vulnerable to changing their minds on something like that. So we're seeing the effects of several years of that happen now with kids that were born in the last few years.
I think to some extent the reason why we're hearing a lot about this now is that it is kind of another symptom of the fake news disease, you know, and like because that topic is so hot right now, I feel like we're also talking about measles as like a part of that. It's interesting that the number of cases of measles, like that there have been so many outbreaks. I think it's frankly really alarming, and I think that parents who don't vaccinate their children are just stupid. Yes.
Now, the internet has become somewhat of a breeding ground for anti-vaccination sentiments through social media, memes, and viral conspiracy theories. Ben, is this something that needs to be regulated by social media companies, regulating the anti-vax content on their pages?
Well, I know that to bring back the fake news disease, I know that in the past year or so, several social media companies and news companies have started pointing out areas when certainly in political news, when there's some false fact in a published story. I don't think that's a bad idea to extend that to scientific things like the measles vaccines, like flat earthers or people who don't believe in the moon landing. I mean, these are all things that people need to be informed about, and whatever, you know, tools that we have on social media to solve that issue should be used.
Caitlin, what do you think can be done about this problem by social media companies, if anything at all?
I think removing anti-vaccination content from websites is a good step. I know that censorship is a sensitive issue, but I feel like with vaccination information, like there is only one science, you know, like I just don't feel like there's room to argue with that. Pinterest has already taken steps toward blocking anti-vaccination content on their website, or just at least not promoting it. I feel like that's definitely a way forward for websites like Twitter and Facebook.
So should we be prepared for more outbreaks in the future? Is there any way to curtail this, and what can we do to prevent those from killing people?
I feel like it's hard, right? Because if someone is so dead set that vaccines are bad, it's really hard to change someone's mind. I don't know that there is a way to do that. I think a lot of this prevention will come, I mean, you hear stories about kids who weren't vaccinated when they turn 18. Now that they're not under their parents' control, now they're going and getting themselves vaccinated. I feel like maybe we can get at the problem that way. But I really do believe that it's hard to change a parent's mind.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this country is very much against the government being involved in certainly medical decisions like vaccinations. But I think that responsible citizens and responsible organizations can certainly promote vaccination. One idea is, you know, schools should not let children in who haven't been vaccinated. I know that's starting to happen in some parts of the country. Universities shouldn't, you know, allow people to live in the dorms if you're not vaccinated. And I would imagine that several workplaces would be interested in not, you know, hiring people who aren't vaccinated. I think that pressure can help solve this problem a little bit with more information being spread as well.
I feel like to some extent vaccines are kind of like car insurance, you know, like it's not like when you get measles, everyone around you suffers. Just like when you drive a car and you like crash into someone, like the person who you crash into like suffers as a result of your action. So in that way, I feel like the logic is there to require people to get vaccinated. It just frustrates me that it's so easy to become exempt.
All right, thanks so much, Caitlin. We'll be right back after this.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Here at Politicat, we know firsthand that the news never stops. So we've pulled a couple of stories you might have missed this past week. In Indonesia, more than 300 election workers have died of fatigue-related illnesses since the election earlier this month. More than 2,200 have gotten sick. April 17 marked the largest single-day elections in world history. Employees were working long hours in humid heat, counting votes by hand, and traveling through treacherous conditions to deliver them. Official race results will be announced in late May.
Also in Indonesia, the country might be moving its capital. Why? It could be underwater in just a few decades. Jakarta is sinking at one of the fastest rates in the world, anywhere from a few fractions of an inch per year to nearly 6 inches. Residents build illegal wells, draining groundwater and causing land to sink. Climate change is also leading to the sea level rise. The move was announced yesterday, though neither a new location nor a timeline have been released.
Your period tracking app might be sharing your personal data with Facebook and even your boss. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that popular trackers like Flow sent Facebook information on when users were on their period or when they plan to get pregnant. Facebook uses the data to target ads and can match information from apps to Facebook users. Flow says that it has now limited its data sharing. Meanwhile, the Washington Post is reporting that similar apps like Avia have sent this sensitive information to women's employers. The data is made anonymous, but experts say it's possible for companies to identify the women, especially if they get pregnant.
Iran is threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, the only waterway that leads to the Persian Gulf. Nearly 20% of the world's oil comes through this strait. Last week, the Trump administration announced it would end oil waivers for U.S. allies that import oil from Iran. The U.S. will begin sanctioning Japan, China, India, and 5 others after tomorrow if they keep importing Iranian oil. Analysts are skeptical that Iran will make good on its threat. And to end our panel tonight on a fun note, we're playing another game of Headlines, this time with a twist. We'll read you 3 tweets. 2 of them are fake, 1 of them real. You figure out which one is real. Are you guys ready?
All right. Yeah.
All right, first, President Trump tweeted, quote, "The Democratic National Committee, sometimes referred to as the DNC, is again working its magic in a quest to destroy crazy Bernie Sanders for the more traditional, but not very bright, sleepy Joe Biden. Here we go again, Bernie, but this time, please show a little more anger and indignation when you get screwed." Second, Elon Musk
Does that
tweeted.
fit into the tweet characters?
We'll see.
Yeah,
it was 2 tweets. It was 2 tweets.
Oh,
actually.
okay.
Okay.
Second, Elon Musk tweeted at Madame Tussauds, quote, "Thinking about turning your wax figures into hyper-intelligent wax androids. Thoughts?" Third, in response to criticisms about his personal wealth, Bernie Sanders tweeted, quote, "My new tax plan will include a 100% tax on anyone who dares write a best-selling book. Are you happy now?" Ben.
All right. So I have a process for this. I know in the past on this show that the first headline has always been the right one, but I think
You
the
can't
writers.
share our secrets.
I think
live
the
on
I
air.
think the writers have gotten over that, and so I don't think the first one is. It's 2 lies and 1 truth. All right.
Yeah.
The second one, I'm a big fan of Westworld, so I would want that to be true, but that seems a little. That seems like a lie as
Ben,
well.
you're running around. What is your answer?
All right. I think that the second one is the true one.
And the Elon Musk one.
Yeah, Elon Musk.
Okay.
And I think the first and last are both lies.
Caitlin.
Okay, I'm nearly certain that the last one was a lie. I thought it sounded a bit preposterous. I also feel like the Elon Musk thing is a little bit too outrageous to be true. I know Elon Musk is an outrageous guy. He tweets some pretty outrageous things. I have to go with Donald Trump.
President Trump is true?
Yes.
President Trump is true. That is now 3 times in a row that the first tweet or the first headline was actually true. So Ben, it's a little
Your
reverse
strategy
psychology.
I
failed.
know. What a surprise.
Yeah.
I don't want that wax museum.
Neither
I've
do
been
I.
there once and I cried and I left.
What?
I was petrified. I was 8.
I've never been to the wax museum.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave
You're
it
from
there.
New York.
We'll talk about this later.
No.
Thank you for playing along with us. We'll be right back.
Are you guys serious?
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go you Northwestern. Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will be tight. We will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Tonight, we've discussed the recent wave of violence against religious communities across the world, as well as an outbreak of measles among people who believe that vaccines cause more harm than good.
These two issues are worlds apart, but they share a common root in the internet. The extremists who attacked 2 mosques in New Zealand and the Poway synagogue were radicalized on the internet, while anti-vaxxers have spread misinformation on the web, causing a resurgence in preventable diseases. The past decade has shown that what happens online can have very real effects. That's not to say that no good has come from the internet. Advances in digital technology have given voice to the voiceless and connected great minds across the world.
Parallel to that growth has been our generation coming of age. Many of us learned how to read on the internet at the same time we were taught letters in school. We merged into social maturity at the same time as Facebook and Instagram began taking over our lives. Because of this, many of us have an inborn sense of what is real and unreal, when to trust and when to question. But there are those on either side of this generational divide that don't share that experience.
It was once common to joke about how our parents believed everything they read online. But those jokes don't seem as funny now that children are endangered because their parents believe that vaccines will cause autism. And while we watched with amusement as our little siblings began carelessly posting on social media, the stakes now seem higher in light of the fact that Friday's synagogue shooting was perpetrated by a 19-year-old. It's clear that our generation must commit itself to promoting truth and accountability on the internet, because the consequences are more real than ever before. That's all the time we have for tonight. I'm Joey Safchik.
And I'm Justin Sweetwood. Thanks for watching.